uh, regular football teams. You know.
Well, I look at them as our first opportunity to hit someone other than ourselves.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. But in my mind, it was like playing. And I can't think of anybody. You know,
Yeah, like playing Tulane.
Tulane or Vandy or
Yeah,
West Carolina, some of those teams that where you go.
you get the idea immediately. You're going in to a lesser team, which is really unfair. And you and I have both seen this because there are days when lesser teams can beat a better team.
There are days, and there are also days when a lesser team doesn't necessarily beat a team or even come close to beating a team, but they make them look so bad because they weren't taken seriously. But I got the feeling that Alabama had their head on straight and were doing their best just to play really good football. I don't think they. I think they dumbed down the game plan. I don't think they did a lot of the things that they would do, if we were playing Georgia again. But I still thought they looked awful good, even considering who they play.
I thought they looked like a good 6th, 7th week football team. Yeah. One that's had a good half of a season come together. They've been playing together for a while. I mean, they look crisp and they look polished.
I know, and they had 2 penalties, which was last year. They had 8 or 9 penalties almost every game. It didn't hurt them a lot, but they still, they looked polished. They looked like they knew what they were doing. They did not look like a team that was playing the first game of the year, regardless of the competition.
No, and the troubling aspect of that is that I could only name 3 or 4 guys on either side of the ball.
Yeah.
If part of that's really good. That means we've got really good depth.
Well, it does, and they played a bunch. They started playing in the second series. They started playing
right, second string offensive line.
Yeah, on the defensive line especially. And another aspect of that, as far as I'm concerned, happened with 2 people they did not play.
Okay.
The big tight end.
Yeah, he was out.
He was out, and he was a game time decision. I think Saban, the way Saban referred to it in the newspapers was he had him on a pitch count.
Right.
Decided not to play him.
Right.
And they basically did the same thing with their starting left or right guard. The guy that has a really funny name that's hard to pronounce.
Yeah.
Like Emu something or something like that. He was a starter last year, and he didn't play at all. And so they had to shift. I mean, their offensive line, they didn't do a lot of power running, and I wondered through the course of the game. I've actually watched a little bit of it this afternoon. SEC Network had it on again today, and I'm sure they'll have more. But after the fact, I looked at how well they did and how many big plays they had, but they didn't line up and just power out against anybody.
No.
And very quickly, I think they're going to have to be able to do that. I mean, they're going to play Arkansas at Fayetteville, either the 4th or the 5th game of the season. And Arkansas didn't look, dynamic yesterday or over the weekend, but they damn sure look good, and they look strong defensively. And the strength of their team is their defensive line. And I think, a trademark of Alabama's football team since Saban has been there has been the ability to line up an offense, look at the middle linebacker and say, okay, big boy, we're going to run the football. We're going to run it within the tackles, and we're going to do it about 8 times in a row, and you ain't going to do a goddamn thing about it. And they've always been able to do that with very few exceptions. And they did not get a lot of, I can't remember seeing them getting stuffed a lot. I remember a couple of times where it was 2 or 3 runs, but I don't remember them lining up and trying to do that at all Saturday where they just, ran 4 or 5 plays. They basically let Bryce Young look at the defense and say, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Well, yeah, and I mean, he needs repetitions just like everybody else does.
He does.
So in reading that middle linebacker, outside linebacker, whoever it is, he's keying on. Yeah, he needs to work also.
I played 2 series into the second half, which
Right.
just get some reps. But
and that's all he needed to break 100 yards rushing.
Yeah.
That was the stat that really caught me by surprise. Jake and I were talking about it afterwards, and he was like, he broke 100 yards rushing. And I was like, well, how does that work?
Well, it works. I was expecting that because during the off season, one of the things, and I think it was in the spring that I first heard this. I heard them talking about it, and they made the comment that they wanted him to run more. That they weren't going to do a lot of designed runs with him because he's not a big guy. But they said, there's going to be some opportunities for him.
Right, but instead of having coverage, well, if everybody's covered up, that means there's a lot of green to run across.
Exactly, and all last year he would scramble around, and finally either find somebody that was open or throw the ball away.
Right.
This year, it seemed obvious on about 4 different runs that they had something designed, whether it was in the scheme blocking or how they taught him to do differently this year, where he just took off. And he was 20 yards down the field before, the last touchdown he scored. I mean, that was like a slow motion play.
Right.
He looked and had everything lined up to throw to the ball to the right, and all of a sudden he looked to the left and there was no white jerseys out there anywhere, and he just started. Yeah. He was at the 20-yard line and he started trotting, and when he got to the 5, he just slowed up even more, and nobody came into the picture with him until after he'd crossed the end zone line. So I was that didn't surprise me. I was happy to see it and glad that they're working on that. And, maybe somebody, the first thing it does is every other defensive coordinator didn't sleep any Saturday night.
No.
Or Sunday night, probably. But because he had to say, well, fuck. I've been waiting when they were going to finally figure out that they could do that, and now they figured it out. So
how am I going to cover this? How am I going to get that 15th person on the field without anybody noticing?
I know. So I really like that part. And like I said, I don't know. I think game 3 or game 4 will happen before we have any indication of how good these guys can be. And then it's, game by game as to whether they are actually become that good. But I was very happy. Number 1 as a running back was magnificent.
Yeah.
And the other 2 young guys that have been there did a really good job. Number 80, they must have pulled him out of somebody's ass or something because, I don't remember hearing I know Jake pays more attention to this than I do, but I don't remember hearing a single word about him. I mean, he's a true freshman coming in there, and he's the starting really wing back. He's the Jalen Waddle of the group is what he was. And I mean, immediately he caught your attention. He was, you're looking and you're saying, well, fuck, he ought to have number 2 on. He looked like David Palmer out there. He just jumped out and started doing shit. And you thought, wait a minute, who is this guy? Where did he come from?
Well, and there were 2 or 3 guys that were like that for me. And I was like, Jesus Christ, have I been in a coma for 2 years? Where'd these guys come from? The stat that I thought, the other stat that I thought was really interesting was, I think it was in the second quarter, they gave our yards per play. And it was like high 6s, 6.7, 6.8. And then in the fourth quarter, they gave it again, and it was like 8.8.
Yeah.
And I'm like, holy shit, they're gaining more now? This is going to be a fun season.
And then the running back, number one, the one that came from Georgia Tech, he busted a couple of really long runs.
Yeah.
And then the wide receiver we got from Georgia, number 3, he was great from the first snap.
Right.
And then the other thing, and I don't know what this means. You never know, not just with Saban, but with any coach. Because a coach is forever handling his roster, and when he's got a guy underperforming, he has to decide: is he a baby? Is he really hurt? Is he pouting? What's the deal? So he has to do something to make sure that he doesn't lose, especially if the guy's got talent. I mean, we're going to see, well, one's going to be on probation, but we're going to see 2 guys that left Alabama and went to Texas that I thought were going to be All-Americans at Alabama, and now they're somewhere else because something happened that they didn't like, which, it happens everywhere. And we've got a lot of people that where something happened somewhere else that they didn't like and came to us. But the wide receiver that came down from Louisville, he didn't play Saturday. They said he had an ankle injury. They said he was in a walking boot.
Okay.
My understanding of him was he was supposed to be more talented than the guy we got from Georgia.
Okay.
Now, if that's true, we're going to have to do like the defenses that are going to play against us, and we're going to have to put 12 or 13 people out there.
Well,
with the running back with number 1 out there, who's a great receiver, and then you got number 3 as your primary deep receiver, and then number 80 as your wide out, your wing back, if you will, slot back, whatever you want to call it. And then when Tamu or whatever, the big tight end. I mean, he was He was at times was our best receiver last year.
Yeah.
And in addition to the blocking that he brought to the line of scrimmage when, on running plays. And so you get all of that, and then you throw the guy from Louisville in there, and you're thinking, wait a minute. And then number 11 was really, really good Saturday. And, he was a backup all last year. He played pretty good in spots last year, but late in the year, especially after a couple of guys got hurt. But, he looked like he should be starting too. We got a lot of guys that look like I think they can run wide receivers in and just wear out defenses just by running them deep, So, and another thing that really impressed me in the course of the day, and I kept waiting for him to get really tired, was our fucking kicker. I'm not trying to be funny with that, but our kicking game, last year we kicked extra points and field goals a lot better than we have the 3 or 4 previous years. We seem to have out, and we did a really good job of it last year. But our kickoffs were very erratic last year.
Okay.
And every kickoff that he kicked off, not only were every one of them touchbacks, but all but one landed in a spot about this big, 5 yards deep, and just to the left in the end zone. Every one of them went in the exact same spot. He kicked one that landed inside the 5, but between the 5 and the goal line, and a guy fair caught it, so it's still a touchback. But, I'm sitting there thinking, wait a minute, because about every second game, we'd have one that would go out of bounds, or we'd have one that they could return. And, the guy just sit there, the same guy just sit there and just boomed them all day long. The only thing we didn't have a way of evaluating was our punting game. Now, I had read on AL.com or something from Tuscaloosa that he had improved a good bit. But
I personally think our punting team did excellent.
I agree with that.
And that's the way I would like to see them in every game.
But the reality is that we're going to play, especially, there's going to be a stretch. It starts with the week that we go to Arkansas. We go to Fayetteville, then we have A&M at home, and then we go to Knoxville, and then I think after that we have Mississippi State, and then LSU. Now, based on what I saw of LSU last night, they may have a new coach by then. But, all of those teams are going to bring legitimate defenses to the mix, and we may beat their ass, and they might not be able to stop us, but I guarantee you we'll punt more than one time in the game against them. So,
I know. It's just
taking into consideration it's the first game of the year, I just have to tell you, it's I'm way more excited than I probably ought to be. I have lived my entire adult life with the understanding that you don't have any clue about a football team until the third or fourth game of the year.
Right.
Not your team, but the teams that your team is playing, because everybody evolves. I think Bear Bryant's the first guy I ever heard say it, but I'm sure he wasn't the first one, that you learn more about your football team between week 1 and week 2 than you do at any point during the course of the season. So that first game is really important, that you start off with that and see where you are. But then all the teams that you play, I mean, Utah State won their first, they had a game under their belt.
Right.
And they won it.
Right.
So, and you start talking about Florida State against LSU, about Georgia against Oregon, Notre Dame and Ohio State, games that were supposed to be pretty big games, and you don't really know. I think Florida just demolished Oregon, because one of the reasons is because Oregon's probably not any better than Utah State is, but they were playing at Athens,
Georgia.
They were already good. I mean, they were defending national championship champions. And they brought a lot of people back. They did lose quite a few. I don't think their defense is as good as it was last year. But
and that was my thought on the Oregon-Georgia game was, does Oregon really deserve to be in the top 25, or is it name recognition?
Part of it is like everything the first of the year. I remember somebody many years ago.
Right. A lot of the charts, a lot of the rankings are done on name recognition, whether it be the school or the coach or the returning quarterback.
Exactly. And you have to do that because you don't have anything else to go by. But I remember somebody saying that they ought to make it against the law to have a ranking system before mid-season. And I agree with that.
See, I think you should have one, but everybody that agrees with this ranking system is suspect to begin with. Well,
that's true, but the BCS, which is kind of what we go by now, they don't even have they don't put a poll out until sometime in November.
Right, because they figured out it don't matter.
Of course, if you think about it, and I know this happens because I've seen it before. There are people out there that have gone in and figured out how the BCS does their poll, and ran the numbers through a computer, so at week 2 they can tell you who probably would be number 1 and number 2 and number 3 and number 4 in the BCS system. So if people want a number out there, they can have it, but it's it's the way we are. We need to know who's best and who's second and how are we doing and all that stuff. So I understand that. And on that note, did you see the story? It came out Friday, I think, that they're going to expand the playoffs to 12 games starting at the latest in 2026.
I saw that they were going to expand it, and that's about as far as I've gotten.
The key.
It's not going to affect this year.
No, it won't affect this year.
And it's not going to affect the team that I'm watching. So I'll learn about it in my own time.
Okay, but here's what I think. Based on some of the information I read, they said it could happen as early as 2024.
Okay.
If that's true, Saban will still be there, and about 75 or 80% of the people we have on this football team will still be there.
You think?
Yeah. I mean, 2024 is 2 years down the road.
I know.
So, yeah, they'll be there for that. So
I don't know about that.
it may not happen that soon. I really think they're at a point now because see, they tried to do this about 6 months ago. And some of the people that didn't want to change a whole lot, and a lot of the bold people that had influence, and we're not doing that. And then when teams started, when Oklahoma and Texas comes to the SEC, and then UCLA and USC go to the Big Ten, when all that starts to happen, then all of a sudden people realize, wait a minute, the big conferences are going to control this. We're going to have to start doing what they tell us. And they didn't want to. So they came up with this plan to save face among the people that are already there. They said, okay, we'll start it probably in 2026, but maybe a little sooner than that. So I think it'll start in 2 years. That's just my prediction based on knowing absolutely nothing about what might happen. But basically what it does, it doesn't really change much, except 8 teams that would not make the playoffs are going to make the playoffs. That's number one.
Okay.
So a good way to look at it, if you want to play with it a little bit, go back to last year and look at the final BCS rankings, where you had Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, and was it Notre Dame? No, it was Cincinnati. Those were the top 4.
Okay.
Okay. If the proposed system, and I think it's not proposed anymore, it's already been voted on and agreed on. If it was in play last year, then those 4 teams would have gotten a bye. And then the next 8 teams would have played each other.
Play in the next week.
Yeah. 5 would have played 12.
Gotcha.
11, that through. And then those 4 winners would have played the 4. And as I understand it, those 4 first-round games would have happened at higher-ranked teams' home field.
Okay.
So you would have had 4 games at, I think Notre Dame was one of those teams. Ohio State didn't make it last year because Michigan beat them. So they would have been next in there. I don't remember if there was another SEC team besides Alabama and Georgia that was the third that could have made it. But anyway, there would have been 4 teams that would have hosted games against the next 4 teams. And then those 4 winners would have advanced and played the 4 bye teams in bowl games.
Okay.
All right. And then after that happened, you would be where we were last year, because you'd still have, at that point, you would have 4 winners out of those games. From 12 would come down in 2 weekends, would have gone from 12 to 4. And then you would start basically what we had last year. So it adds 2 weekends to the season, which is not much, and gets more inclusion in there, and it puts a lot of pressure on the teams that have to play in that first round, because they have to get ready to play an extra week against a team that's not playing anybody. So.
Right.
But